And I want to just take a moment right now to give acknowledgement to the land that we are each on, acknowledging the indigenous nations of these lands. And for me, I'm on Tongva land, acknowledging the ancestors of these lands that we are on. We honor them with this conversation and this coming together. And I also want to call forth our ancestors of each of our family lines, honoring all the gifts that we've received from our ancestors. I ask that they bless this conversation. Hey y'all, I'm Ellen. We've been super inspired by our journeys of self-healing and discovery.
And I'm Sam, and we want to share our experiences with you to help you get curious about yourself, reconnect, and get intentional about your life so you know what makes you happy.
Welcome to Woo, the podcast. So I want to begin today just by kind of setting the tone of this conversation, because I think this conversation is going to be unlike any other that we have had on Woo. And I'm really excited to introduce our guests today, Harpinder Mann and Irene, who are the two co-creators, co-founders of the Women of Color Summit. And I had the honor of holding a workshop during the summit this past February, which I was introduced to the summit through and got a chance to listen to a lot of the speakers that you guys had curated. And I'm really excited for us to come together and have this conversation because I feel like it's a very necessary one. And it's one that we, like Sam and I haven't really had extensive conversations about. But I want to first just say thank you for creating the Women of Color Summit, because it's just such a beautiful, inclusive space for women of color to come together and have pretty challenging conversations and really work through a lot of ancestral trauma and a lot of wounds, a lot of shadows that we all hold, and really kind of come together to like share and support each other in just the dismantling of this oppressive system that we find ourselves in. And for me, just full transparency, a lot of the subject matter was very new to me. And it's really only in the last year that I myself have started really talking about this term decolonization, what that really means, and realizing for myself that there is no separation between decolonization work and healing. And so I think what you guys have created, this beautiful melding and bringing together of healing, of social justice, and of wellness, everything kind of coming together, is just so important and so necessary, and in a way that I don't think has, it's like we're just coming into this like realization, I feel like. I mean, some of us are more like ahead of others in walking and really learning and expanding in this space. But yeah, I just want to say thank you first and foremost. I think where we can begin this conversation is just really at the very beginning. How did you guys meet, and how did you guys come up with this idea to create the Women of Color Summit?
First off, we just want to say thank you to you, Ellen, for being a part of the summit. For everyone tuning in, Ellen led a wonderful breathwork journey to do with our shadows, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful transmission. So we are so grateful that you were able to be part of the summit too, and just thank you. We're just receiving all of that you just shared. But in terms of like how it all started, um, it's I laugh because it's such a funny like story, just in terms of like the synchronicity of everything kind of lining up. Me and Harpinder, we both met when we were doing a decolonization and yoga mentorship with Constanza Eliana Chinea, who is a decolonization and liberation educator. And we were paired up as accountability partners. So we were told to go off have weekly calls with each other, check in with each other, see how we were doing with the homework. And it was really up to us and our discretion of how much we wanted to take it. And we were very organic with our connection. We did not rush or force the process of getting to know one another. And we basically just talked about what our values and what we were seeing happening in the wellness space as yoga teachers. And we talked a lot about the diversity and accessibility problem that we were seeing, because the wellness industry is really just a microcosm of the larger industry, the larger world that we operate under, which is capitalist, white supremacist, neo-colonialist, and patriarchal. There's a lot of problems that transfers into the wellness industry, but it just gets, the microaggressions just changes from it's just work, don't take it personal, to, well, don't be negative, love and light, right? So there's all these things that we were seeing happening. And so some of those problems that we saw in the wellness space, which is, with the diversity and accessibility problem, how that was showing up was seeing that the experts and the influencers that was getting the news, getting the coverage, getting the accolades were all homogenous. They were all white. And these events, these offerings are also not really accessible unless you code switched or unless you had the money to pay and buy in. And if you couldn't do those things, then your voice wasn't really considered worthy, didn't really matter. And there was just a lack of community in these spaces that we were in. And there was also this frustration of knowing that a lot of these practices are indigenous to our ancestors, but those practices are being sold back to us by white people, and then a relationship that wasn't really reciprocal. And so going over these frustrations, that kind of led to like us saying, like, do we want to do something together? Do we want to do something with this? And so we really created the summit out of this desire to amplify the voices of our community, because we knew we're not the experts. We can't speak for all of these different spiritual modalities. So let's bring in these amazing, inspiring Black, Indigenous women and non-binary people of color that we were seeing, that we wanted to talk to. And we wanted to be inspired by them and celebrate their work. And we knew that there were other women of color who would get a lot of healing from seeing people that look like them talk to them about healing. The summit is really a space to center us. And we really wanted to empower community. And in this way, this was our challenge. This is how we were challenging what we're seeing in the industry.
First of all, I also want to echo Ellen's sentiment. Thank you guys so much. This is such a powerful conversation. And I feel like this has been coming up so much just in the context of my day-to-day recently, because especially in the wellness space, I feel like everything is so magnified and it's very isolating. It's very off-putting.
Yeah.
And so, and I guess my curiosity is around like what actually drove you guys to both seek that workshop.
That's a good question.
To seek the decolonization yoga mentorship. Yeah, that's a really good question. I know for myself, so we both, it began January 2020. And prior to that, I'd been teaching yoga for about a year and a half. But it was really interesting because a lot of the spaces that I was personally going into to teach, all the students were white. All the other teachers around me were white. And there was such a hyper focus on the asana, the physical practice. And seeing this offering put out by Constanza Eliana Chinea, where it was talking about these issues that you're experiencing in this yogic space is real. Because I feel like sometimes there's a bit of gaslighting that can happen where it's like, oh, there are more people of color here. Like, they're just not a part of our community. Like, it's okay. Like, you can be the token in a sense. And yeah,
You
yoga
mean
classes. Go ahead.
as a teacher, you're saying this, like, in terms of like the community?
As a teacher, yeah. As a teacher. But like going into these spaces as a teacher where the students coming in are all white, but then also the co-teachers are also all white. And it's this place of where if we don't question the status quo, I feel like some folks are okay being the token. And okay being the only person of color that's teaching, or the only person of color that's in that space learning. But something that I found was in a lot of these spaces that I was in with this hyper focus on the physical practice, I was like, there's no connection to spirit here. There's no connection to what yoga is really about. And if the goal of yoga is liberation, and not just liberation for ourselves, but for one another, that's just something that I wasn't seeing. So when I saw like Eliana's program for myself, it was talking about like, do you see a problem in the wellness spaces? Are you the only person of color in these spaces? Are you seeing that people can't afford it? Do you want to make a difference? And a part of it was like, if you want to continue to be, say, a yoga teacher, is how do you do it in a way where you're creating equity for one another? And where you're working in a way where like community is at the forefront of your mind. And so for me, I was like, yes, like these problems are true. And I sometimes didn't feel comfortable teaching when all my students were white. And it took a very long time for me. And actually, no, I don't say namaste in my classes because it's to a point where it's a little bit triggering. Hearing it in the way it's used and the way it's pronounced. And so joining this program for me was really these problems that I was seeing. And it's like, this isn't right. So how do I change it? And how do I learn from a teacher and a mentor like Eliana that's really speaking openly about these things? And I felt so lucky that me and Irene were paired up as accountability buddies. Because they were just like, I think the first 2 to 3 months, like we would just hop on the phone and just talk, sometimes up to like 2.5 hours, and just talking. And it was so nice, I think, to finally get to this place where also speaking to another woman of color about these issues and realizing like, oh no, these things are real. And I think something I think about is like, when we think about sanity and insanity, like what does it mean to be insane? It's when your reality isn't being confirmed for you. And in some of these spaces, I was like, am I insane? And then talking to Irene, she's like, no, I see it too. And I feel it. And that to me was a little bit of that stepping into my power of like, oh no, like these things are real and change needs to be made.
Yeah.
Like, that's just so true, about, like, for me, there was a very similar process of finding Eliana's mentorship, where there's just like this frustration, in the yoga space that I was trying to break into. Like, I was putting on my resume, doing the traditional career path for a yoga teacher, which is like, going to the community centers, going to the fitness studios, eventually wanting to be in a space where I'm like teaching at the teacher studio, right? Like the studio where all the teachers go to practice. And it just wasn't working. And then seeing the yoga teachers reflected back to me on social media, I'm like, this is what I have to do in order to get students. And I kept seeing all these thin, very asana focused practices. And I love asana, but like, it was just this hyper focus on the physical, and on the shallow. And I wanted and I wanted to be able to speak to another yoga teacher, woman of color, who had gone through that process of wondering, like, how do we move past this yoga that is being really projected and in the West, and really focus on, like, returning back to why we went to this practice, right? Like, I didn't go to this practice in order to be like an acrobatic, flexible model, like, and
Right.
I, unfortunately, that's just like what that perception is. That's just so unfortunate that that is what the perception of a yoga teacher is in the West. But that's not why I went
Mhm.
into it. I went into it because of all the learnings I gained on the mat that I could take off the mat, right? Like all the things that I could do with my mind, with my peace, with how I show up and how I care for others. Like that's really what I wanted to return to when I took this mentorship.
That's so brave for both of you to do that because, like, even for myself, it was like I loved yoga and I was like, I'm
Mm,
never going to go to a class. I'm never going to learn how to teach because I was just like, the energy of the people in those spaces was so
mm,
intimidating and uncomfortable for me. And like,
mm,
it's so inspiring to hear that you guys rose above that and that you came together to help change that because yeah, to Ellen's point earlier, like this is a new conversation and like we're so excited to be having it with you guys.
Yeah, I also feel like with my experience with yoga, because, I kind of got sucked into it too. And full transparency, I did it for exercise because that was what it was marketed to me as.
mhm.
It's like a gentle way to stretch out. I used to go to this studio called, I think, Y7.
Yeah.
And they have like, right? I'm sure you guys are
Yeah.
familiar,
Yeah.
and it really is, it's almost kind of like, I forget how they tout themselves, but like hip hop meets yoga or whatever,
Yeah.
and, you know, like it completely is just about working up a sweat. And it's sweat yoga, it's like hot yoga, but like it's all about working up a sweat. And, as you guys are talking, I'm sort of like walking back into, you know, back when I was in the corporate career and, just trying to feel better, just trying to exercise, just trying to maintain my body and all that kind of stuff, really very much in the system and very blind to everything.
Mm.
And just coming out of it, when Sam and I just started our healing path, again, still very blind to everything that you guys are saying because at that moment, all I wanted to do was feel better. And like when you're so blind
Mm,
to the oppressive system around you, because that's just your norm, that's just your reality, then you kind of are very vulnerable to all of the like the wellness tropes, right? Like
Mm.
start meditating because it's going to make you feel better. It's not about spirituality. It's not about
mm,
like the real point of meditation is. It's simply just an alternative to, pharmaceutical, medicines. You know what I mean? It's like it's just a place where you can kind of like get quiet, but it's only through that practice of diving deep into, meditating and really trying to understand. I think it's somewhere down that path that you start to develop the consciousness and the awareness that wait, this is not all it's meant to be, you know?
mm,
And so I really appreciate where you guys are sitting as teachers, as yoga teachers, and really questioning the system because I don't think, I certainly was unaware of it, coming out of my corporate career and like getting into the healing space, completely blind to it because you just think that like, oh, the spiritual community is better than the corporate community and
mm,
I'm now on a better path,
Mm.
completely missing the point that like, oh no, the same shit is here too. It's
mm.
just almost in a sneakier and more,
Mm.
you know what I mean? Like less transparent way.
Yeah, I feel like there's a few things that you brought up that really spoke to me. What I have found interesting is when people talk about using meditation as a way to be more productive.
Mm-hmm.
And to me it's so interesting because it's like we're trying to use these systems that are or these tools that are meant to bring us peace and connect us to all living beings around us, but instead we're trying to use them to become better capitalists,
Yes,
and to
exactly.
and produce more. And I'm like, we're kind of stepping in the opposite direction of what these practices are meant to do. And so to me, that's just kind of been something almost funny to just look at when students come to me and they're like, oh, I want to perform better at work. I want to get that promotion. So I heard I should start meditating. And it's kind of like, well, let's step back. Like, are you happy at your job? Is that what you want to be doing? Like, why do you want that promotion? I feel like sometimes we get so caught up in this system that we're not even looking at, is this system something that's serving me? And I think for me, spirituality, like when it comes down to it, is how can I be of better service to those around me? And how can I be a better person? And I don't necessarily know if these are the questions that people are asking when they are practicing.
I think you like hit the nail on the head completely, because it's like the intention is already kind of warped from the beginning, and not because it's anybody's fault. It's because we're also programmed to believe that that this is the way to go. This is what success looks like, right? This is like how you get ahead. This is how, and I see a lot of spiritual teachers, not necessarily just in the, in yoga or meditation, but like a lot of spiritual teachers who are like still very much in the hustle and really trying to, they're like, there's nothing wrong with trying to build a business out of what you're doing. Like, we all have to survive. We all have to put food on the table. But I think it's like the intention behind it, when you become a little bit more conscious after being on this path for a while, you start to see the transparency of that. It becomes a lot more like, it's like your sensitivity meter becomes a little bit more acute to pick up on the intention behind some of these spiritual teachers. And you can kind of just tell just from like what they post on Instagram too, you know what I mean? This particular summit this year, this was your second summit, correct?
Yes.
It was, yes.
Yeah. So when was the first one last year? Because you guys had met in January through that program, and you guys spun this summit up really fast, which I was just like, wow, this is amazing. It totally was meant to be.
The first summit took place last year in the summer. It was in July, right? The end of July?
July 2020, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I really think like for the summit, I think there's a bit of like the trust in the universe and like trusting in flow and not hustling. And I do really, and there's something I've been saying to myself is like, what's meant for me will be. And I think with the summit, it was meant to be. And for me and Irene, like working on it, we didn't have an attachment to the outcome. We saw these issues and we're like, we want to talk about it. We want to bring community together. But if at the end it completely fails, so what? And it was stepping away from that like perfectionism of it needs to look like a certain thing. And I think those things really allowed it to flow, for it to be live the last week of July, which in hindsight, when we were planning the second one, we're like, how did we put the first one together so quickly?
It was divine intervention.
I mean, it really was.
Yeah, that's incredible. What was your theme for the first one?
Is the art of creative living.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
And this year it was the art of living authentically. I love how did you guys even come up with these themes, and what sort of was the thought behind it?
Yeah. So with the art of creative living, that really came from the conversations that me and Harpinder had about um, creativity and abundance, right? And like, what does that mean for us, and how does that show up? I think that, you know, the conversations that me and Harpinder had about creativity and abundance, right? And like, what does that mean for us, and how does that show up? I think that, I sometimes as women of color, there can be a block from believing in our innate creativity. And so we wanted to talk to just amazing, inspiring. I know I keep using these words, but like they really do mean a lot to me. Um, about just these women who we literally just had crushes on and that we wanted to talk to. Um, and we wanted to amplify their voices. And it was this idea of this question that we kept talking about of like, where does creativity come from? Do I have a right to be creative? Should I create even if it is a failure or a success, or if like what will people think of me if I create something? You know, all these questions about creativity that's like tied up with our self-worth and how we want to be seen in the world, how we're scared of showing up in the world. I think those undertones were brought into that first summit, and all those questions of like, you are worthy of creating, and it doesn't matter what that end result is. It's the act of creating something from nothing that is powerful, right? It's our imagination that we can't let die, that we can't repress anymore. Because without imagination, we can't think of new ways of being and of seeing and showing up in the world. Um, so that was really, I think, one of the major themes that came up for us. And with the art of authentic living, I feel like Harpinder has a lot to share about this, because she was the one who I was like, oh my God, I read this amazing book. You have to read it. And then I read the book and I was like, oh my God, it's amazing. And that book, The Wild Edge of Sorrow, was really the foundation for why we were hooked on this theme of authentic living.
I just bought that book because I think you guys had mentioned it during one of the speaking engagements. I haven't started it yet, but I'm like, okay, I got to dig into this book.
Yeah, I mean, that book really transformed my worldview in a sense. And it was something I've been working with my main yoga teacher now for the last year. Actually, we'll be starting a breath mentorship on Monday, which I'm excited about. But she recommended reading The Wild Edge of Sorrow. And I bought it, and it was on my bookshelf for probably a few weeks or so. And then my grandma passed at the beginning of this year. And it was having to kind of figure out a way to process and work through that. And this book really helped, because it talks about the power of grief and the power of ritual work and moving through grief. Because I think there's a lot of inauthenticity when we're only trying to be happy and only trying to be nice and only trying to act in certain ways that we think like society wants us to be, without understanding that as humans, like, we have anger and sadness and grief and confusion. And how do we use things like rituals to begin to understand the darker side of being human? And how do we move through some of those things? And this book was particularly talking about how powerful grief is. And not only grief over the loss of a loved one, but even over the loss of knowing that the earth around us is changing, and that there is climate change, and some trees and animals that were once on this planet are no longer here. And so it's talking about how there are people that perhaps have depression, or have anxiety, perhaps already have this knowingness that there is so much loss. And it's embodied within them. But if we don't take this like time to talk about it and do ritual work, so we can work through it, it just stays stuck in our body. And to me, that was just so powerful, because I personally have dealt with depression and anxiety and feelings of being stuck and not being able to move through things. And I've had students that have had just very intense depression and not wanting to get out of bed because they're weighted by the weight of the world. And it's like, how do we acknowledge that that is real, but also acknowledge that with ritual work that we can work through that, and that there is power in that transformation and alchemy, that there is magic. And for us, it was wanting to talk about the very real things of anger, sadness, grief, of jealousy, of envy, and how do we work with those things? Because that's part of being authentic, is honoring those very real emotions and the spectrum of emotions that humans have, without being like, no, like only love and light and only positivity. And if you are sad, it's because your vibes are wrong. And it's like, that's not right. So how do we move? And I think particularly also as for us with the summit, with like women of color, non-binary people of color, because there's more oppression that we face. There is perhaps more of that anger and sadness. And we need to be able to talk about that again without being gaslit and being told that it's not real.
Well, yeah, and it's such an important process too, to acknowledge that anger doesn't have to be a bad thing. That when you sit with it and you feel it and you process it, it teaches you where your boundaries are. It gives you the momentum you need to start speaking up and stepping into your authenticity and setting those boundaries. And it's like, if we just repress that all the time, it's like we see it in society constantly now. Like autoimmune disease is higher than it's ever been, and it's all this repressed emotion that people have been taught not to feel or not to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, it's so real also. I mean, just speaking from, as an Asian woman, it's the repression of anger, anything that's deemed not feminine. That's just been like how you were raised, and like that's what you're programmed with since you're really little, even like throwing a tantrum as a child. It's that you get, at least I did, got a lot of slap back for that. And it was like you're silenced even when you're a little kid, that it's only through your emotions that you can communicate, So I love that you guys made that the theme of this year, particularly after COVID, particularly after, George Floyd. And, he certainly wasn't the first by any means. And, but it's just like the time right now that we live in, this particular message is just so important, because there is so much coming up to the surface that needs to be processed. And if our old programming is telling us like it's wrong to be angry or just swallow it down or whatever, yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine, like it's just so damaging. You guys put together and curated an amazing roster of speakers this year, and I thankfully got a chance to hear many of them. Are there any particular truths that came out of those talks that has stayed with you, or even from the workshops? Are there things that you could share that have impacted both of you on a really deep personal way?
Yeah, I think the interview with Keisha Delva was really impactful for the both of us, because she talks about decolonization, but even challenging this binary of like colonizer, colonized, and the centering of the colonizer when we're even using the term decolonization. And she says instead, using the term remembrance, and that remembering that we're not just, if we're looking at decolonization, decolonized, but remembering that we are already whole and beautiful people of color that have been on this land for a very long time, and paying respect to the indigenous people that were and are on this land, and that we're already whole. And I think that was really powerful reframe for us, because it was also, again, a reminder of how do we focus on communities of color and uplifting them and giving them space for them to share their stories and voices without always having to constantly focus on white folks.
Um, Yeah, Keisha's interview was just so powerful, and it reminds me of the interview that we did with Marika Clymer, who is a Reiki practitioner, and she also talked very similarly about some of the problems when we use these terms, colonizer, colonized, and one of the aha moments for me in that interview, which kind of felt like an extension of what Keisha was talking about, was like one nice long story, was, one of the impacts of when we focus on this binary of colonizer and colonize is that we become so focused on trying to find other people who are, the colonizer, and we start to focus on that. And I think that's something that I'm seeing right now, especially on social media, which is this uh, just creating a lot of um, like spectacle and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of emotion and anger and like fury from a lot of people who may not actually be engaging with some of this conversation and may not be actually looking at the context of things, but just jumping onto this bandwagon of like lighting the fire and adding to the fuel with some of these
Mm-hmm.
conversations and dialogues that are going on. And what Marika was talking about, which I found really impactful, is about like we're so focused on looking at other people's like mistakes, and is that really like the focus of our energy? Is that really where we should be spending all of our time, letting it consume us?
Mm.
Wouldn't our time be better served thinking about um a community and thinking about how we can just share our stories without always focusing on like knocking people off pedestals or even putting people on pedestals in the first place?
Yeah, I really really respected what she had to say so much, in fact, that I applied for her Reiki apprenticeship.
Nice.
I'm like, fingers crossed I actually get in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really appreciated her perspective because I felt like it was the first time I was really kind of sort of like shining the light at myself again, and really trying to fully understand my privilege
Mm,
and see myself as both, colonized and
yeah.
colonizer, and for myself, like I've been very much kind of focused on that very, to me, it's almost like the first step in really understanding some of these like deeper themes. But for me, I really needed to understand like that my experience, like I may be an Asian woman, and I was watching all these speakers really, I think it was right that same week when the Asian women were killed in the various massage parlors in Atlanta.
Mm,
And so the timing of it, of like receiving that message, was also like it was I felt like it was divine.
mm,
But it was really easy for, it's really easy for me as an Asian woman to say like, okay, I'm the oppressed, I'm the, victimized or whatever.
mm-hmm.
And there is a lot of anti-Asian sentiment going on right now. But I also had to step back from that and really recognize, after hearing her talk, there are ways in which I have oppressed, and,
Mm-hmm.
and completely blindly,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's really recognizing the two spaces
Yeah.
that, you can start really truly healing.
Yeah, you can be a target and an agent of oppression at the same time. And we, we need to we need to do that deep discernment work into ourselves. Yeah, absolutely.
The other person that really, I think, spoke to us so much that we invited her back on to be a part of our closing circle was Dr. Tamsin Lee. Because during her interview, she talked a lot about protecting your energy, and particularly around how we put so much of our own healing into other people's hands. And how not everyone deserves that, that not everyone is a teacher, and not everything is a lesson. And goes on to say, like, we need to be careful and protect ourselves as both healers and as students. And that was really impactful for me, because I think sometimes we look for our healing and our transformation in others. And I think that's led in a lot of different like spiritual spaces, this like over reverence of a particular person as a amazing healer and guru, and they will heal me. And it's like, but you do your own healing. And no one else can heal you. You heal yourself, and other people are there to help you. And something else that she said was being mindful also on who we share our story with. Not everyone needs to hear everything about ourselves. And I thought that was really impactful as well, that there are parts of ourselves that we're allowed to only share to people that really care about us, and that it's a very safe space.
Thank you for making that point. That is so, it's such an important thing, especially in this day and age of overshare, and like where everybody's sort of documenting their lives on social. And I feel like, you know, especially in the wellness community too, there's just, there are just a lot of stories being shared constantly. But I love that you brought her up, because I literally am just looking at, it's like the page where I took my notes from her particular talk as you brought her up. And I'm like, okay, this is totally divine too. And I just want to read out one quote, because I feel like this is a great segue into the next question. But she was talking about the spiritual wellness community and how, you know, there's a lot of people now that are just like, I'm a breathwork coach and a Reiki coach and and it's just like the laundry list of all these different certifications and blah, 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 blah. And she had this one quote that I actually like transcribed. She goes, when you think about all indigenous practices, it takes a long time to do it, to practice it, to help others, to support others. It's not this thing that you can do in like 6 weeks, get a certification and boom, you're a shaman. All right. Or go to Peru and ta-da, it's like this, it's like this lifelong journey. And I think we live in a society where we want things very fast. We like young people. So if you're young and beautiful, you get access to everything. And it's not this journey that takes a long time to cultivate so that you can actually help people. And I think this is what I'm really starting to become much more aware of in the spiritual community. And again, like I was saying before, it's like the hustle culture within the spiritual community. Like, let me get all these certifications so that I'm much more viable and people are going to come to me for all these different things, you know? And I'm curious, like from y'all's perspective, having held these, these 2 summits now and just all the conversations that you have been having, what do the teachers and the healers in this community, what do they actually need to learn from your perspective that's currently missing in this training? And I think you touched upon this a little bit.
So I feel like that quote from Dr. Tamsin Lee really fits in with what teachers and healers in the community perhaps need to seek to learn that's currently missing in some of this training is, like you're saying, we are seeing people that have the Reiki 1, Reiki 2, are now Reiki Master, became a yoga teacher after 1 or 2 weeks of training, and are just collecting all these certifications and accolades. It's a lot of like little shallow holes that are being dug, a lot of surface level skimming of these practices that are meant to take you so much deeper. So visualization is something me and Irene have spoken about, is how do we start to dig a hole down? Choose something. If it's yoga that you are just so passionate about, how do you continue to practice that for yourself on a daily basis? And not only just collect the information and the certifications, but apply it to your life. I think that's something that's missing, is people are doing these certifications to say it, to have students, to make money, but it's not actually being applied to their life. And And there's another point that I think Irene was going to make around is like, are you a teacher or are you an influencer? Which I'll let her share.
Yeah. Um, I think that's a really big question that anyone that's in the healing industry and the healing community needs to ask themselves, because there's really no judgment about what path you take if you're a teacher or you want to be an influencer, but you need to be honest with yourself, because you're going to take different steps and different actions if your end goal is to be an influencer who wants to work with big brands versus if you want to work with people to heal them. You're going to move differently throughout the space if those are your goals. And so I think that there needs to be that questioning of like, why? Like, why are you here? And really understanding your values and knowing like, what is this legacy that you want to leave behind? And that really comes from being honest with yourself, so that then your audience and the people that you want to attract knows like what to expect from you. And I just wanted to like talk a little bit more about what Harpinder was saying, was like it's like this consumption of spirituality. It's that I think it comes like, if we want to look at this like certification craze from like a positive light, because I've definitely fallen into that trap of like, okay, oh, this offering sounds so exciting. I want this, I want that, I want to go on this. Because it's like we are in this space because it's exciting. Like we want to learn and we want to be in these spaces. But sometimes you got to take a step back and be like, um, yeah, like how can we go deeper into one thing? Because then we end up falling into this new age trap of thinking it's okay to consume and cherry pick, and also believe in some way that like there's nothing beyond yoga than like asana, or that there's nowhere deeper that we can take this. But it is a lifelong journey, and the more I get on the mat, like the more I learn. It's not something that, okay, I've done all my learning that I need from this. What else can I now consume? So we really need to like switch and reframe how we approach the practice, right? And I was also just going to add that, like, maybe I think for me, as someone who has a marketing background, I think stop thinking like a marketer sometimes and hopping on these trends. Like it's so
Yes.
easy to culturally appropriate when we start thinking about like how can we mishmash all these different trends, like chakra drinks, cat yoga, talking about the 5 elements theory and traditional Chinese medicine and like applying that to a vinyasa practice. Like these are all like real examples that I've seen. And again, that again is just perpetuating this idea like it's okay to mishmash these very long traditions, these very long lineages, and erases this context that is very important if we want to really respect and give reverence to this practice.
Yeah, that brings a lot of attention too, for me to like sort of the concept and the, I don't know if danger is the right word, but around these sort of like Instagram healers or these spiritual Instagram coaches, where it's like they're easy to find, lots of people are following them, great, but it's like who's asking the questions around like, why am I following them, why am I inspired by them, why do I want to learn from them, and like what can they teach me in this path that to continue evolving and learning the way I want to. And I feel like people just get so sidetracked by the bells and whistles and the brands and all of this other stuff around like, oh, I'll do a weekend Reiki certification and then I'll just start taking on clients, in the evenings, just like make a little bit of extra cash, without realizing like there are so many elements that they're ignoring in that process that are so essential to these practices.
Yeah. It's just so surfacey, and I'm one who took a weekend Reiki course, like a Reiki 1, Reiki 2. I'm attuned, Saturday, Sunday, done. You know what I mean? And to me, it's like I didn't even feel compelled to practice, because it just felt so so fast and so sort of like I got attuned and I started practicing on my own for myself, but there was no way I was going to feel comfortable enough to open up and serve a community with what I just gained from a weekend attunement, you know? And so, yeah, I feel like the word that you used, Irene, consumption, you know, it's just, as you guys both really eloquently said, even in the very beginning, it's just a reflection of the bigger whole, right? Like the system, the oppressive systems that we live in, and spirituality and the wellness community, they are no better. They're not separate from those kind of ideals. And so, or ideologies, I should say. So yeah, I feel like, you know, for me, just sharing where I'm at right now, because, you know, this is, I think Sam and I we quit our jobs in 2018. It's not like we've been in this community for that long, you know, and we've been learning and being on our own separate paths of healing. And, you know, I just feel like I'm now at the point in my journey where a lot of this stuff is coming to the surface, and a lot of the harder questions. It's almost like I had to work through a lot of the grief that I still retained, and a lot of, you know, mother wounds, shadows, and do a lot of that work for me to be able to get to this point of consciousness and realization that, you know, this community, this spiritual community, you know, I'm now asking myself the hard questions, like, what kind of teacher do I want to be? I personally don't even love or like the word healer, you know, because I feel like it suddenly puts the onus on the person who is, quote unquote, doing the healing or doing the guiding. And for me, it's never sat well with me, because I feel like that's where you start to develop the gurus and the people who have these like insane followings. And, you know, people are vulnerable in this space. They're coming to the spiritual and wellness community because they know that they need healing, and they're putting their trust in somebody to guide them. But it's so easy for that teacher or that healer to take advantage of, you know, the people who are coming to them and assume this like godlike role, in a sense, you know, guru-like role. And it's just ego kind of coming through. So I think what you brought up, like the hard questions, like, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to be here? You know, like, money is a reality. We all need money to survive. But I think those of us who choose to work in this space really need to hold ourselves accountable and ask, like, is this a life that I want to live? Because it's really not a career. It's a life, you know, it's a way of life. It's a way of being. And if you choose to look at it as a career, I think that's where it leads you down that path of inauthenticity.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful way that you put that, because I'm definitely seeing a separation of the teachings but the practice in one's own life. And I think it's when someone is viewing it as their career versus like a lifelong practitioner and like being on this path. And like, there's one sutra of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali I've just been going back to for the last month and a half now. And for me, it's realizing, like, I am going to pass one day, only still have learned 0.001%, much less than that, of all there is to know about being on this path. But at least, like, for me, it's this recognition of, like, this is a lifelong journey that I have accepted to be on this path. And when we make that separation of, like, no, this is just what I do to make money, then it just starts feeling really icky. And like you said, like, the inauthenticity really starts to shine through, because then we're not accepting that we're on this lifelong path. And money is something that was created by humans. Like, it's not something the spirit or soul or this divine creation intended to really be on the path in a sense. So to attune our awareness, I feel like, to being a practitioner in this way, to career, to money, to these like human-made constructs, I think we're still only touching the surface level, not going much deeper than that.
That's such an important point. You guys have put together a really amazing offering. You guys have been doing like, moon circles and things like that throughout the year, but you've put together this really amazing offering for the summer that I'd love for y'all to share with the community.
So we have an exciting summer program that's starting in June. And so deepening your spiritual practice and community really came about because we saw that there was a need from our community, from those who attended the summit, who has attended our new moon gatherings. And they had a desire to continue to be in that container, to be in that community. And they really wanted to deepen their practice, their spiritual practice in that space. And so we came up with this idea for this program. It was really out of that need. Um, and so deepening your spiritual practice and community is going to be about a 6-week long group program, small, cozy, intimate. We have about, I think, 13 women and non-binary people of color in the program already. So, we're basically almost full up. And it's full of some really wonderful people, like social workers, as well as people in the wellness space themselves, and who have very similar objectives to be in this space, which is to really strengthen their intuition, listen to their inner voice, be in community and be seen and be heard, as well as to be able to deepen and grow so that they can really manifest how they want to show up in community, in the expansiveness of themselves. And so this is really a space where we envision, a place of transformational self-care, a really brave space, where we will be looking at a couple of different modalities that me and Harpinder both personally get a lot of value, as well as healing and liberation from. So we'll be talking about meditation, attunement, journaling practices, menstrual cycles, indigenous practices to our own cultures, some tarot work, as well as energy, prana, chi. And so that's kind of it in a big nutshell, so to speak. We're really excited for it. This is the first time we're going to be doing a group program together, holding space in this intimate way. I'm just really excited to see what will happen with everyone that shows up. And yeah, I don't know. Harpinder, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think the other thing I would like to name is that we are wanting to explore these spiritual indigenous practices through a decolonized framework. And what that means for us is, since a lot of these practices do come from our ancestors, our cultures, our backgrounds, is how do we empower ourselves to go learn about them? And then when we're looking at it from a decolonized framework, is having that relationship, having that right relationship with our ancestors and with nature. And then when we are working in this spiritual way, for us, when we're looking at it from a decolonized framework, is using our privilege for social justice. So it's not just using these practices to make money, to experience personal healing, but how do we make the collective consciousness, the collective world around us a better place? And so I think that's something that's really important for us when we are looking at these practices, is how can we practice in right relationship with ancestors, with the indigenous holders of these medicines, with the land. So I think that's something that I'm particularly really excited to talk about with the people in this space.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm actually really excited to see what comes through too. And, I think it would be really helpful to maybe have some resources or people maybe even like social handles that you two personally follow to have these types of discussions just on a daily basis. Are there anybody that you would recommend that we follow, that we start to, or books that we should look into? I know you mentioned, shoot.
The Wild Edge of Sorrow.
Yes, thank you. The Wild Edge of Sorrow. Is there anything else that you guys would recommend?
Honestly, following all of the speakers and workshop facilitators on social media, that would be a really great first step. And also exploring their offerings, taking their classes. We love them, like we respect their work, which is why we wanted to invite them to be on our platform. But in terms of other resources, for me, and also Ellen, you may know this book too because they're both part of Mimi Young's mentorship. But I recently finished The Great Cosmic Mother, which I really loved. It's a very dense tome, but like as a feminist and as a yoga teacher, it's like a book for spiritual feminists. That's how I think of it. If you enjoy myth and archaeology, it's just a really deep book about the patriarchy and sort of like unconditioning yourself from like a lot of the lies that the patriarchy has told about us as women. And I would also like to recommend Minor Feelings by Cathy Hanh. So she is a Korean American poet, but she published a book of essays last year, I think. And it's just such a powerful work about Asian American identity. And also she has a very good Twitter feed as well. So those would be my two books that have really changed me recently.
Thanks, Irene. I think for me, I would echo going on to the Women of Color Summit website or the Women of Color Summit Instagram, Facebook to find all of our speakers, our workshop facilitators, and following them because there's such a wealth of knowledge and wisdom from people like Ask Johns, Pinar, Dr. Lords, Ashley Hunter. And something that I just finished reading for myself was Fear, the Essential Wisdom for Getting Through the Storm by Thich Nhat Hanh. So much wisdom there. And so that's something that I would recommend as a resource for folks. I also think like having to bring Constanza Eliana Chinea back into the space because that's really where we learned a lot of this like decolonization, what it means, what is the framework, how do we move away from these old systems of being into a new world. And she's just a wealth of knowledge, and I know she does like Instagram stories and brings on speakers. So I would definitely say follow her because she's amazing.
We'll definitely add all of this to the show notes so that you guys have it.
This is incredible. Thank you.
And we always like to ask this very last question of all of our guests. In each of your own journeys of healing, what has really been the one resounding lesson that you have learned or perhaps are still learning right now that is just incredibly transformative?
So for me, it's this idea of expansion and of knowing that my ego is not the enemy. I think that, ego work, ego is, there's a lot of, I think, misconceptions around ego and how we think that we shouldn't have an ego, but the ego is something that we need and that is a part of us. And for me, it's knowing that there's room for everyone to shine.
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson for me has been around this like deprogramming and wanting to create equity for one another and being able to speak freely and authentically. because I feel like sometimes like capitalism, what it tries to get us to buy into is this model of like scarcity, that there's only enough resources for a few. And so you have to fight and compete against one another. And for me, it's like there is enough room on this stage for all of us. There is an infinite amount of creative potential that we have within ourselves, where we, with alchemy, like we can create something out of nothing. And so how do we move in this way where if we believe that there is infinite resources, infinite space, it starts moving in a way where you prioritize like collaboration over competition and community over individual profit. So I think that's been my biggest lesson with the work that I've been doing.
I love that so much, because I feel like even at the beginning of Ellen and I's journeys, like I was constantly talking about the shine theory. And it's like when one of us rises, everyone rises. Like there is no reason to shame or put down or compete with. So that was really beautiful. Thank you both for sharing that.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you so much just for being with us, you know, and sharing your thoughts, sharing your perspectives. I feel like we, to say barely scratched the surface is almost an understatement. These like topics are so broad and so deep. And, you know, I think I definitely would love to have you guys on again, where we can maybe even pick one particular theme and just really go deep into that theme. But I think what we really wanted to do first and foremost was really introduce, you know, your creation, the Women of Color Summit, first and foremost to the community, and let it be known. And, you know, it's just an incredible community. It's an incredible resource to learn about things that, you know, quite frankly, the greater wellness and spirituality community isn't necessarily talking about publicly or openly or loudly just yet. And so I think that's why the existence of the summit, you know, and the work that both of you guys are passionately doing is just, it's like,
so inspirational.
It's going to change. Yeah, it's going to change the landscape, you know. It's so important. Like, I don't even know how to emphasize that strongly enough. It is just so, so important. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellen and Sam, for having us on and giving us this platform and space to be able to share about our work and share about these really important themes and ideas and things that have really been coming up to the surface. And thank you for acknowledging our work and receiving it. We really appreciate it. We appreciate both of you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've had just so much fun talking. Like, it's really flown by. So thank you for creating this space for us to just be able to share honestly.
Yeah, anytime. I mean, again, seriously, I think this is just the beginning, and I think we need to have much more open dialogue about all the things that we touched upon, but just in a much deeper way. So more to come,
Yeah.
I guess is my point.
It's been such an honor, honestly. We're learning so much from you guys, and this is a really powerful conversation that we're excited to continue.
Yeah. Music for Woo New is composed by Adam Miller.